It should have been a beautiful day. The kind of sunlit coastal afternoon where lavender-scented breezes float through open doors. Champagne flutes glint like jewelry, and everyone speaks in the gentle tones reserved for expectant mothers. That's what I'd pictured anyway. What I'd prepared for, gift wrapped with silver ribbon and signed, "With love, Leah and Jonas." But my husband's hand was like stone in mine as we stepped over the threshold. At first, I thought it was nerves. Maybe a cybersecurity breach back at work. Maybe something lingering from his ER days that he couldn't shake. Jonas gets quiet when he's tense, focused, clinical, like he's scanning for a pulse no one else knows to check. I've seen it before, but never like this. Marianne met us at the door in a gauzy lilac dress that floated around her like a cloud. Her smile was wide, cheeks glowing, her hands instinctively cradling the perfect swell of her stomach. The bump was symmetrical. Too perfect, maybe. But I didn't think anything of it then. Just pregnancy magic. "Leah! Jonas!" She beamed, wrapping me in a hug. Her perfume smelled like peonies and powder. "I'm so glad you came." Jonas's grip on my hand didn't loosen. We stepped inside. The beach house was immaculate. Cream and lavender streamers, catered hors d'oeuvres, even a harpist near the patio playing something delicate. Laughter floated through the open balcony doors. I took it all in. The warmth, the curated perfection, and started to breathe again. Then Jonas leaned down. His lips brushed the shell of my ear. "We need to go," he whispered, voice tight and low. "Now." I blinked, pulled back slightly. "What?" He didn't answer. His eyes swept the room again, over the buffet, the cluster of guests near the gift table, the woman balancing a charcuterie plate in one hand and mocktail in the other. He wasn't looking for someone. He was calculating something. "I'm serious," he said, barely audible. "We shouldn't be here." The weight in his voice chilled me, but I smiled anyway, a reflex. "Jonas, it's Marianne's shower," I whispered back. "She's been planning this for months." He stared at me a second longer, then let go of my hand. That was the first moment I felt it, the fault line, the tiniest crack running through the day. I stepped deeper into the room, smiling and nodding at familiar faces. But behind me, Jonas lingered in the doorway, watching like someone who knew what was coming before it hit. And even then, I didn't follow him out. Because how could I believe there was danger hidden in something as soft as a baby shower? I had no idea that Whisper would be the first domino, that hours from now, nothing about that day or Marianne would feel innocent again. There are people you grow up with so completely. Their history becomes inseparable from your own. Marianne was that person for me. From treehouse forts in elementary school to late-night calls in college about boys who didn't text back, she was always there. The constant, my chosen sister. We had a shorthand, 1,000 inside jokes, a map of each other's lives so deeply memorized that we didn't even need explanations anymore. I knew when she was lying to her mom by the twitch in her left eyebrow. She knew I only chewed ice when I was holding in tears. Ours was a friendship threaded through every version of ourselves. Awkward, ambitious, broken, rebuilding. And I trusted her more than anyone who shared my blood. That's why I couldn't square the unease in Jonas's voice with the woman who had sobbed in my arms after her third failed IVF cycle. The same woman who once mailed me a candle every month of her hormone treatments, each one scented with a ridiculous name: Hopeful Lavender. Fresh Start Citrus, a ritual, a lifeline. When she told me she was finally pregnant, she'd cried so hard she couldn't get the words out. We sat on her balcony, wine left untouched, and she handed me the ultrasound like it was sacred. Her hands had trembled. Mine had too. Now, I stood in the middle of a shower that looked like a Pinterest board come to life. Tables draped in cream linen, sugared almonds in mason jars, calligraphy signs that read, "She's almost here." Marianne moved through it all like a queen, graceful, glowing, adored. But Jonas hovered near the edge of the room, arms folded, gaze cutting through the decor. "She looks amazing," I murmured to him, trying to soften whatever invisible wall he'd erected. He didn't respond, just kept watching her. It made no sense. Marianne had always liked control, yes. Her parties were scheduled down to the minute, her holidays color-coded. But that wasn't a crime. It was just who she was. What could possibly be wrong with a day like this? I joined a group by the cake table, laughing when someone guessed the babies. Weight as 6 pounds and fashionable. The room buzzed with lightness, joy. But Jonas never joined me. Not once. When the harpist paused, Marianne clinked her glass and gave a little speech. She thanked everyone for coming, joked about her feet being swollen even though she was wearing sandals without a trace of indentation. Everyone cooed at her story about craving dill pickles and chocolate chip pancakes. I laughed along, even as something in the back of my mind itched. It was nothing, just Jonas getting in my head. That's what I told myself. Until I glanced across the room and saw him still standing near the door, jaw tight, eyes locked on Marianne like he was seeing something I couldn't. That was the moment I first wondered. What if he was right? We didn't talk about it in the car on the way home. The road curved along the coastline, late afternoon sun casting long gold streaks across the dashboard. Marianne had hugged us both at the door, her arms soft around me, her gratitude effusive. Jonas had offered a tight smile, nothing more. I wanted to be angry with him, for the shadow he'd cast on the day, for the way his silence during the shower had made me feel like I was betraying someone by laughing. But mostly, I just wanted him to explain. "What was that?" I finally asked, my voice steady but cool. Jonas didn't answer right away. His hands rested firmly on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road. I waited. "You saw her," he said at last. "You didn't notice anything?" "Notice what? That she looks beautiful? That she's finally happy?" "No, not that." His jaw tightened. "That she's not pregnant." The words landed like a slap. I blinked at him, waiting for a laugh, a correction, some softening of the blow. It didn't come. "That's a serious thing to say, Jonas." "I know." He glanced at me briefly, then looked back at the road. "The bump," he continued. "It's too perfect, too still. Her posture, her ankles, her energy. She floated through that house like she was on stage. There wasn't a single moment where she looked uncomfortable. And you know what I didn't see? A single doctor's appointment reminder. No ultrasound photos on the fridge. No prenatal vitamins in the bathroom. And not a single slip." "You went through her bathroom?" "I wash my hands," he said flatly. "I notice things. You know that." I did know that. Jonas didn't miss details. It was part of what made him excellent at his job, and part of what sometimes made being married to him feel like living under observation. "And there was someone else at that party," he said, voice lower now. "A man I recognized." I looked at him, wary. "He's a pediatric surgeon. Works at the hospital I left 2 years ago." He reported Marianne once for trying to access restricted medical records using someone else's login. Said she claimed she was looking into potential surrogacy matches, but it was a lie. That makes no sense. She used a false name. I shook my head, but the motion felt shaky, unconvincing. She's my best friend, I said. She wouldn't fake something like this. She couldn't. Jonas didn't argue. He just drove, the silence between us growing thicker. The sea stretched out beside us, calm and endless. But inside me, something small and sharp had begun to stir. A splinter of doubt. I had known Marianne since we were children. But what if there were pieces of her I never saw? What if the woman I'd defended all my life was building something beneath the surface? Something dangerous? What if the most perfect day wasn't real at all? I couldn't sleep that night. Jonas lay beside me, motionless, already drifting. But my eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, tracing invisible patterns in the shadows. Every detail of the afternoon looped through my mind. The champagne flutes, the cream-colored napkins, the way Marianne had laughed at the exact right moments, and the man by the fireplace. I hadn't noticed him at first. Not really. He was just another guest, another well-dressed blur in a room full of curated celebration. But now, when I focused, I could remember. Tall, dark suit, salt and pepper hair, barely touching his wine. His eyes hadn't tracked Marianne with warmth. They had watched her like someone collecting data. I turned to Jonas in the dark. Tell me exactly what happened with her and the surgeon. He didn't open his eyes. I told you. Tell me again. He exhaled, slow and resigned. She came to the hospital asking questions. Said she was looking for information on surrogate eligibility. But she wasn't working with an agency. She used a fake name to try to get into the internal records, matching profiles, health histories. The surgeon flagged it. Security looked into it. She disappeared before they could follow up. She never told me, I whispered. No. She wouldn't have. My throat felt dry. And you're sure it was her? I wasn't at the hospital when it happened, but I saw the report. Her photo was attached. I got up and walked to the kitchen, feet cold against the tile. I poured water but didn't drink it. Just held the glass and stared at the wall like it might give me answers. None came. In the morning, I went through old messages from Marianne. Texts with bump pictures, comments about cravings, light complaints about back pain. But there were no doctors' names, no appointments, no scan dates, no baby names discussed. Not even a nursery photo. It struck me all at once. Everything had been surface. Pretty, but vague. I scrolled back to the announcement. A photo in front of her fireplace, one hand on her belly. The caption, "Miracles come when you stop expecting them. Can't wait to meet this little soul." Thousands of likes. Dozens of supportive comments. No due date, no mention of how far along. It wasn't nothing. But it was empty. Still, I resisted the feeling that bloomed in my gut. Suspicion tasted bitter, especially when it turned toward someone you loved. Maybe Jonas was wrong. Maybe Marianne had kept things private because she'd been through so much loss. Maybe she just wanted to hold the joy close. But I couldn't shake the memory of the man by the fireplace. The way his eyes had narrowed, not in admiration, but warning. Like he was watching someone build a house out of matchsticks and wondering when the spark would come. I didn't ask Marianne about it. Not right away. Instead, I called her the next afternoon, pretending I'd forgotten a small gift at the shower, something trivial enough not to raise suspicion. She was cheerful, bubbly, told me to come by any time, said she'd be out for an errand, but the house was open and I could just let myself in. Top of the stairs, first door on the right, she reminded me, her voice lilting. The nursery. The word hit differently now. I stood on her porch an hour later, holding nothing, my palms sweating despite the breeze. Her house was still perfect, the walkway lined with lavender, a soft wreath hanging on the door. Everything about it said, welcome. Everything about me said, unease. Inside, the silence pressed close. No music playing, no distant hum of a dishwasher or TV. Just the steady creak of floorboards beneath my shoes as I made my way upstairs. The nursery door stood ajar. I pushed it gently. The room was pristine. Cream walls, white curtains, a crib positioned just so. But something was off. The crib mattress was bare. The baby monitor sat unopened in its plastic box on the dresser. A stack of diapers was neatly arranged, tags still intact. There were no personal touches, no laundry, no clutter, just the idea of a nursery, staged and untouched. I stepped closer to the desk in the corner. A file folder rested there, thick with papers. It shouldn't have been open. I shouldn't have touched it, but my fingers moved before I could stop them. Inside were letters, thank you notes from couples, some typed, some handwritten. Phrases repeated like echoes. We're honored you chose us. Can't wait to welcome him home. You're giving us the greatest gift. Each letter referenced a different name, different cities, different timelines. I found an email printed on hospital letterhead. Marianne using an alias, promising updates on a pregnancy she wasn't carrying. Each couple thought they were the only one. I sat down hard on the edge of the chair. My breath came shallow, chest tight. She wasn't just pretending to be pregnant. She was pretending to be a surrogate for multiple families. And they were sending her money, gifts, love letters wrapped in desperation. I put the folder back exactly how I found it, hands trembling. Backed out of the room, down the stairs, through the door. Outside, the air felt too sharp, too loud. The breeze of the water that had once seemed soothing now sliced through me. I drove home in silence. Later that night, Jonas didn't ask what I found. He didn't need to. He looked at my face and knew. I lay awake again, not from doubt, but something colder. She wasn't just lying. She was building something out of lies, a tower, a trap, and I'd been standing in the middle of it, smiling. The next morning, I returned to Marianne's house. This time, I told Jonas I was going for a walk. He didn't ask questions, just looked at me the way he had the day before, quietly, with the kind of understanding that doesn't require words. The sky was overcast. The wind had picked up. Everything felt heavier. I parked down the block, far enough that no one would notice my car. Her house stood quiet and still, the kind of stillness that only comes when no one's home and no one's expected. I rang the bell once for form's sake, waited, then took out the spare key from beneath the third flower pot, same place it had always been. Inside, nothing had changed, the same lavender scent, the same polished floors. If anything, it looked too perfect, staged, not lived in. I climbed the stairs again, slower this time. Every creak underfoot seemed louder, like the house was warning me. The nursery door was still ajar. I pushed it open with my fingertips, half expecting the folder to be gone. It wasn't. It sat exactly where I'd left it, like it had been waiting for me. This time, I read more carefully. The details were devastating. Each letter was specific. Names of the couples, their jobs, their stories. One from a grieving widow who'd lost her husband in a car crash and believed this baby was her second chance. Another from a same-sex couple who'd already painted their nursery yellow, gender-neutral, and full of hope. Each believed Marianne had personally selected them, that the child growing inside her belonged to them. And the dates overlapped. She'd crafted parallel timelines, multiple pregnancies. One woman, many wombs, all lies. There were receipts, too, donations logged as support, wire transfers, shipping labels from baby registries. Everything looked official. Everything looked just believable enough, but none of it was real. She hadn't carried a child. She hadn't registered with any surrogacy agency. She'd built a false identity so thorough, even I hadn't seen the cracks. At the bottom of the stack, I found photos. Her, holding her belly, slightly altered in each shot. The same background, the same lighting. Just a slight change in outfit or pose, stage progression. A timeline that didn't track with biology, but no one looking at them in isolation would notice. She'd played the part so well. Smiles, glow, carefully chosen words, and she had used every bit of trust she'd built with me to sell the story. I sat there for a long time, not crying, just still, like if I didn't move, the weight of it wouldn't crush me. Eventually, I stood, put everything back exactly how I'd found it, straightened the folder, smoothed the duvet on the twin bed in the corner, and when I left, I locked the door behind me. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. But I knew this wasn't just deception. It was theft of money, of hope, of futures she had no right to touch. I didn't tell anyone. Not Jonas, not my sister, not even the voice in my head that always pushed for action when things went wrong. I just waited. The folder haunted me. Not just the contents, but the precision of it. Marianne had built it like a portfolio. Clean, organized, purposeful. As if each forged email and copied message had been laid with care, like bricks in a carefully constructed house of cards. I kept replaying the thank you letters, all those voices so full of hope, so trusting. There was a particular one I couldn't stop hearing, a typed note with a slight slant, the font just a little too big. Thank you, Marianne, for making me believe in family again. It was signed only Laura. No return address, just that name. That hope. What kind of person takes that from someone? I pulled out a notebook from my shelf that night and began to list the names. I couldn't help it. They came back to me like whispers. Michael and David, Trina and Sam, the widow who never gave her first name. I wrote them all down, not for evidence, for humanity. I needed to see the lives she'd touched and twisted. Jonas noticed the change in me, of course. He asked once gently, "Did you find what you were looking for?" I just nodded. I found enough. We didn't speak about it after that, but I kept thinking, how long had she been doing this? Did she start after the last failed IVF round? Or had the plan begun before, seeded slowly in moments of desperation and envy? And worse, had she ever really wanted a baby? Or was this all about something else? Control? Money? Power? I remembered her saying once, years ago, some people are good at becoming mothers. I'm good at becoming stories. We'd laughed. I thought it was a joke. Now I wasn't so sure. That weekend, I drove out to the cliffs near the water, our favorite spot in college. Back when we were broke and everything felt raw and honest. We'd bring a bottle of cheap wine, sit with our backs against the rocks, and talk about the lives we'd build someday. Marianne always said she wanted to be remembered. Not famous, not rich, just unforgettable. She'd gotten her wish, hadn't she? I sat there with the wind in my face, the notebook in my lap, and the ache of betrayal humming under my skin like a storm just out of sight. I wanted to hate her. Part of me did. But another part, the part that had braided her hair in 7th grade and cried with her in hospital. Waiting rooms just felt hollow. Like something had died quietly, and the funeral would be mine alone to hold. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew I couldn't unknow what I'd seen. And Marianne couldn't unknow that someone else knew now too. I began to see it everywhere. The little lies, the slanted truths that had once passed unnoticed because I trusted her so completely. It wasn't just the fake pregnancy. It was the stories. The subtle contradictions that had peppered our friendship for years. Things I had filed away as forgetfulness or stress, or just Marianne being Marianne. She once told me her ex had cheated on her with a co-worker. Said she walked in on them. A year later, she mentioned that same man moved away suddenly after she confronted him for stalking her. At the time, I didn't question the inconsistency. I only remembered the tears. I offered comfort, not clarity. There was the time she told me her cousin stole from her, claimed she'd opened a credit card in Marianne's name and run up charges. I nodded along, indignant on her behalf. But when I gently asked if she needed help getting a lawyer, she brushed it off, said it had been handled. She had a talent for making herself the center of chaos without ever letting anyone get too close to the flame. Now, every memory felt warped, every shared laugh held under suspicion. It was like watching an old film and realizing, for the first time, that the background is painted and the smiles are rehearsed. I scrolled back through our texts, rereading with new eyes. Messages about morning sickness, about kicks she claimed to feel. Once she texted me that she was crying in the baby aisle at Target. Said it was all becoming real. Said she'd bought a tiny onesie just to feel something solid in her hands, but none of it had happened. Or worse, it had, but for the wrong reasons. She'd constructed a world and invited people to believe in it. Not just me, dozens of others. People she didn't even know who'd latched onto her story like a lifeline. And she used them. Used their pain, their longing, their need to believe in something bigger than loss. I started printing things. Emails, screenshots, bank transaction logs she'd shared with me months ago. Evidence of expenses that now look like staged plays. Each page I added to the growing stack felt like a weight pressing on my chest. It wasn't just documentation, it was betrayal, given shape. There was no more room for denial. Marianne hadn't stumbled into a lie. She had built it, piece by piece, with the kind of patience only someone deeply committed to deception could manage. And still, what gnawed at me most wasn't the scope of it. It was the ease. How effortlessly she'd spun it all, how completely I'd believed her. I'd defended her, loved her, looked at her glowing at that shower and thought, this is what healing looks like. But healing doesn't come in borrowed lies. And love, no matter how deep, can't survive in a place where truth has no roots. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, I sat with the weight of it, morning after morning, my coffee growing cold beside untouched toast, my hands curled around the mug like it could anchor me to something solid. I replayed every conversation with Marianne from the past year, every moment she'd looked me in the eye, and fed me a piece of this carefully manufactured dream. She knew what I'd lost. She knew about my miscarriage 2 years ago. She held me through that grief. brought soup and silence and soft words when no one else knew what to say. And that's what made this feel like a deeper betrayal. It wasn't just that she lied. It's that she used my pain to cushion her own performance. If anyone would believe her, it would be me. And she knew that. There were nights I rehearsed what I'd say if I confronted her. I imagined walking into her house with the folder in my hand, laying it on the table, and watching her face shift from confusion to recognition to fear. I pictured the moment her stories cracked. The silence that would follow when she realized she had nothing left to spin. But each time, I hesitated. Because beneath the fury, there was still something softer. Grief, maybe, or guilt. A part of me still remembered the girl who used to sneak me extra pudding cups in the cafeteria, who once punched a boy in the arm for calling me plain, who used to draw little stars next to my name when we passed notes in middle school. How do you face someone who loved you like that and lied anyway? I made a list, 2 columns. One side labeled tell, the other stay quiet. Under tell, I wrote, protect the families, stop the fraud, do what's right. Under stay quiet, I wrote loyalty, history, fear. The second list felt like a wound. I stared at the page for a long time, then tore it out of the notebook and dropped it into the trash. There was no easy answer. Every time I tried to define it, what she'd done, what I should do, it shifted. Was it fraud? Emotional manipulation? Theft? Grief playing dress-up in delusion? Or was it something colder? In the end, I didn't make a decision that week. I just waited. I went to work. I responded to emails. I ran errands and smiled politely at neighbors and pretended everything was fine. But inside, I was unraveling. Because once you know the truth about someone you love, you can't unknow it. You can only decide what kind of silence you're willing to keep. And my silence was becoming unbearable. It wasn't me. That was the first thought that shot through my head when I saw the headline. Coastal surrogacy scam uncovered. Woman accused of defrauding multiple families. I was standing in line at the pharmacy, a bottle of ibuprofen in one hand and my phone in the other. The article sat there, bold and brutal, beneath a photo I knew too well. Marianne, smiling, wind in her hair, taken on the beach a year ago. A photo I had taken. My stomach dropped. I didn't read the article right away. I stood frozen, still clutching the bottle, a flush creeping up the back of my neck, as if everyone around me could hear the blood roaring in my ears. I paid, walked to my car, sat behind the wheel in silence. Only then did I open the link. It laid it all out. Anonymous reports from adoptive couples, allegations of falsified medical records, burner phones, duplicate promises. No arrests yet, but an active investigation. No names cited by the families, but enough detail that anyone who knew her would understand. And suddenly, I wasn't the only one who knew. The story spread fast. That afternoon, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from acquaintances, old co-workers, even an aunt I hadn't spoken to in years, all asking the same question in different words. Is this about Marianne? I didn't respond to any of them. Jonas came home early from a meeting. He'd seen it too. He didn't say I told you so. He didn't need to. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the article open on both our screens. The silence between us thick with everything we weren't saying. Do you think she knows it's out? I asked finally. He nodded. She knows. I imagined Marianne somewhere, phone in hand, watching her world collapse in real time. I wondered what face she wore in that moment. Shock, denial, or the same calculated calm she'd worn at the shower. I couldn't decide which frightened me more. By evening, someone had posted a thread online, collecting stories from affected couples. It wasn't just 3 or 4. It was over a dozen. Each believed they were the only ones. Each had photos, messages, a trail that led back to her. Still, I hadn't spoken her name to anyone, not publicly, not yet. But the truth had slipped free, like smoke through cracks, and no one was going to put it back. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd burned every bridge she walked on, left only embers. And now the wind had found them. Marianne disappeared. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts vanished overnight. The beach house stood quiet, curtains drawn, mailbox overflowing by the 3rd day. No one had seen her. No one knew where she'd gone. The silence left in her wake was louder than anything she could have said. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I didn't. What I felt was harder to name, something between grief and nausea. Like mourning a death you never saw coming, only to realize the person you're grieving is still out there, breathing, hiding. The media storm didn't last long. It never does. The story was compelling, but it competed with bigger scandals, louder names. Within a week, it faded from the front page, but the damage lingered. One of the couples released a statement anonymously, a simple line buried in a local follow-up article. She made us believe we were chosen. That's what hurts most. That line stuck with me. I carried it around in my chest like a splinter. People around me started to pull back, unsure of what I knew or when I knew it. I could feel it in their eyes when we crossed paths in town, the lingering pause before they spoke, the question they didn't voice. Had I been part of it? Had I known? I didn't owe them answers, but the doubt scratched at something tender inside me. I had believed her, defended her. I'd smiled at that shower like everyone else, worse. I had hosted her in my home weeks before, shared meals, swapped stories, and never once sensed the scale of what she was building. Jonas stayed steady. He knew how to weather chaos. But I caught him watching me more often, like he was bracing for something to shatter inside me. I didn't. Not visibly. But part of me did begin to dim. There's a strange kind of shame that comes from being close to someone who does terrible things. It doesn't matter that I didn't know. It doesn't matter that I didn't condone it. What mattered was that I'd loved her, called her family, held her secrets without realizing they were toxic. I stopped answering calls, stopped checking headlines. The silence between me and Marianne, once filled with shared memories and text threads, now felt like a canyon, wide, echoing, irreparable. She had always said, "We'll grow old together, you and me," matching gray streaks, still finishing each other's sentences. But we wouldn't. That future had vanished like her, too easily, too fast. And the version of me who believed in her without question, she was gone too. It was a Thursday evening when she came back. The kind of night where the rain falls in steady sheets. Not dramatic, but relentless. Soaking everything in a kind of gray hush. I was sitting on the couch, blanket over my legs, a cup of chamomile cooling beside me. Jonas was still at work. The apartment was quiet. The knock was soft. 3 taps, then silence. I didn't move at first, just stared at the door like it might knock again, like maybe I imagined it. Then it came again. 3 slow, Deliberate knocks. I opened the door, and there she was. Marianne stood on my front step, soaked to the skin, hair plastered to her cheeks, mascara bleeding into the hollows beneath her eyes. She didn't look like herself. Not the woman from the baby shower, not the confident storyteller I'd known all my life. She looked small, shaken. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper, like she hadn't spoken aloud in days. I didn't say anything. She looked down at her feet, then back up. "Can I come in?" It was instinct, maybe muscle memory, that made me step aside. She crossed the threshold like a ghost, dripping water onto the hardwood, arms wrapped around herself. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, unsure if I was trying to keep the cold out or something else in. Marianne stood in the middle of my living room, unsure of where to go. Her eyes flicked to the blanket on the couch, the half-empty mug, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. She used to belong here. Now she looked like she couldn't remember what it felt like. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't offer her a towel. I didn't ask her to sit. "You disappeared," I said. "I know. They're saying it's a dozen families. More." She flinched, a subtle shift in her shoulders. "It got away from me." My jaw clenched. "Got away from you?" "I didn't mean for it to—" "Don't," I cut in. "Don't tell me this wasn't intentional." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were hollow, but something flickered there. Remorse, maybe, or panic. I thought I could make it right, that I could give someone something real before it caught up to me. I stared at her. Rainwater pooled at her feet. "And the ones you lied to? The ones you stole from? What do they get?" She didn't answer, just stood there, drenched and silent. I didn't ask why she came. I didn't ask what she wanted. I already knew. Not forgiveness, not even safety. She wanted shelter from the collapse. But I wasn't sure I could offer her even that. I let her stay. Not because I forgave her. Not because I pitied her. But because something in her eyes told me she'd already run out of places. And maybe, on some deep, bruised level, I needed to see what the aftermath of her lies looked like in the flesh. She showered in silence, emerging in one of Jonas's sweatshirts, sleeves swallowed past her wrists. I made tea, set a cup on the counter without looking at her. She sipped it like it hurt. We didn't speak much that night. She curled up on the couch with a blanket, not asking for more. I slept with my door closed. Morning came quietly. The sky still hung heavy with rain. She was already awake when I stepped into the kitchen, staring out the window with the stillness of someone trying not to exist. "You shouldn't be here," I said. She didn't turn. "I know. They're looking for you." "I know that too." I waited for more. An apology, a plan, even a breakdown. But Marianne just stood there, shoulders hunched like she was expecting something to fall on her. "You used me," I said finally, voice low. "You used our friendship to cover your lies." She turned then, slowly. Her face looked older, washed out, like someone who had stopped pretending. "I didn't plan to, at first." The words hung in the air, flimsy and raw. "But when you believed me," she continued, "it made the story real. Even if it wasn't. That's not comfort, Marianne. That's cruelty." "I know." She sat down at the table, fingers curled around the warm mug, eyes not quite meeting mine. I told myself I was giving people hope, she said, that I was just buying time until I figured something out, until it became true. And when it didn't? She didn't answer, just stared into her tea like it might fill in the silence for her. I sat across from her, arms crossed, heart cold. You forged letters, took money from people grieving, desperate for a child. You sold a dream to anyone who'd pay for it, and you used your body, your charm, your friendship like tools. She flinched at that. It wasn't about money, she whispered. Not really. Then what was it about? Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, the mask dropped completely. Control, she said. Being needed. Being the center of something. After so many years of watching everything slip away, my job, my relationships, my body failing me, I wanted to be chosen, even if I had to fake the reason why. There it was, the truth. Small and brutal. I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel rage, just exhaustion. You can't stay here, I said. Marianne didn't argue. She just nodded, like she already knew this was the last time I'd let her in. And maybe the last time anyone would. She left just after noon. No suitcases, just a canvas tote with God knows what inside, and her coat still damp at the sleeves. She didn't ask where she should go. She didn't ask for money. She just stood at the door with her hand on the knob, like she was waiting for something to hold her in place. I gave her nothing. Do you think they'll press charges? She asked, not looking at me. I don't know, I said, but I think someone already has. She nodded, slow, not surprised. I meant it, she said, voice thin. The part about giving people hope. That's not how hope works, I replied. She didn't argue. Instead, she looked at me one last time, and something flickered across her face. Regret, maybe, or shame. It was hard to tell. For all her talent with words, Marianne had always been more skilled at hiding than revealing. I loved you, you know, she said quietly. The past tense landed like glass on tile. I didn't say it back. She left without another word. I stood at the window and watched her walk down the block, head bowed against the wind, disappearing the way she'd always done, quietly, efficiently, like someone slipping behind a curtain. I didn't follow. I didn't cry. But I did feel something unhook in my chest. A release. A kind of grief that didn't weep. It just let go. Later that evening, I opened the folder again. It was all still there. The emails, the copies of the letters, the surrogacy contracts that never existed. I laid each page out on the table, not to analyze, not to organize, but to face it. The truth in full. She had done this. She had chosen it, and for all her pain, all her unraveling, she had still made deliberate choices that left real harm behind. Somewhere, there were nursery rooms painted in colors that would never match a child's skin. Somewhere, there were hopeful names picked out, tiny socks folded, ultrasound photo frames waiting to be filled. And all of them sat in limbo now, because of her. Because of the story she needed to be real, no matter who it hurt. I lit a candle, sandalwood and myrrh, and watched the flame for a long time. Not for ritual, not for forgiveness, just to sit in the quiet and feel the weight of knowing. The kind of knowing that can't be undone. She had loved me, maybe, in her way. But love isn't a shield when it's used to blind. And trust doesn't survive fire unless someone tries to put it out. Marianne never did. And now all that remained were ashes. Of friendship. Of belief. Of the woman I thought I knew. I waited 3 more days before calling the lawyer. Not because I was unsure, not anymore, but because I needed time to steady my hand, to let the noise in my head settle into something close to resolve. The firm Jonas recommended specialized in fraud and misrepresentation. The woman who answered was calm, methodical. I told her I wasn't pressing charges myself. I wasn't a victim in the legal sense. But I had evidence, a lot of it. And I wanted to know how to pass it on, securely, officially. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause on her end. Then she said, "You've done most of the legwork already. What you've compiled is enough to initiate an investigation, if it hasn't started already." "I think it has," I said. "Then your file could help them finish it." I uploaded the folder digitally, scanned and ordered. I kept the physical copy, though, not for revenge, not for protection, but because I needed a record of what happened when silence wasn't enough anymore. By the end of the week, someone came to pick up the originals, an investigator from the local prosecutor's office. She didn't say much, just confirmed the contents, and asked if I'd be willing to testify if it came to that. I told her I would, not because I wanted to see Marianne suffer, but because I'd seen the other side of silence, and I wouldn't live there again. That night I walked past her house. It was still dark. The window shuttered. A lockbox on the door, probably installed by the realtor, now trying to unload a property laced with whispers. The lawn had started to yellow. The welcome mat was gone. I stood on the sidewalk for a while, hands in my coat pockets, watching the wind stir a single strand of ribbon tangled in the porch railing. Lavender. Faded. I didn't need to go inside. I didn't need to see the empty nursery again. Everything that mattered had already left that house, and most of it had never been real to begin with. Back home, Jonas didn't ask where I'd been. He just looked at me, studied my face for a moment, then nodded once, as if he could see that something final had settled into place. I pulled the envelope from the drawer, the one Marianne had left on my table before she walked out, sealed, unopened. I stared at it for a long time, then slid it into the bottom drawer, beneath old tax returns and expired warranties, a place where forgotten things go to stay. Because I didn't need her words anymore. I had the truth. And the truth, once spoken, once named and placed on record, draws a line no apology can cross. I walked through her house one last time. It had been listed online, price reduced, photos scrubbed of personal items. I scheduled a private showing under a different name, not to buy, just to see what remained, to walk through the space as a stranger. The realtor met me at the door, all smiles and scripted enthusiasm. I nodded along, said little, let her lead me through the stage kitchen, the echoing living room. But I didn't care about the granite countertops or the vaulted ceilings. I wanted to see the nursery. When she turned to check her phone, I slipped upstairs alone. The door was open. No crib, no curtains. The cream walls now painted a neutral beige. Nothing left but the faint outline of where a dresser once stood and the shadow of a nail above it. The air smelled like fresh paint and dust. Empty. I stood in the middle of the room and let the silence settle around me. It didn't haunt me. Not anymore. It clarified. This had never been a room waiting for a child. It had been a stage. And now the show was over. I thought about all the times Marianne and I had talked about becoming mothers, how we'd planned to raise our kids together. birthday parties in the park, sleepovers, matching Halloween costumes. We'd dreamt those dreams side by side like they were inevitable. But somewhere along the way, her dream twisted, became something else, something that didn't require love or patience, only belief. And once she had that, she didn't need truth, just attention. I walked to the corner where the desk used to be. I could still see the shape of the carpet pressed flat where the legs had rested. That's where I found the folder. That's where everything started to unravel. I didn't cry. Grief had already passed through me. What remained now was something cleaner, sharper. This wasn't my loss. Not really. It belonged to the people she lied to. The families who would carry her absence like a phantom, who would pack away unopened gifts and rewrite futures they had once dared to believe in. But I had to see this space. I had to stand in the lie and breathe the air where she'd built it, so I could remember how easily something false can feel real. Downstairs, the realtor called my name, the one I'd given her anyway. I didn't answer right away. I took one last look around, then stepped out, closing the door behind me with a click. I didn't leave a note. I didn't say goodbye. Some spaces don't need closure. They need to be left behind, quietly, like a room that was never meant to hold a life. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about the letter. The one Marianne had left behind on my table, sealed in an envelope with no name, no markings. It sat untouched in the bottom drawer, nestled between forgotten paperwork and silent years. A ghost that didn't rattle, just waited. I didn't open it, not because I feared what it said, but because I already knew. It would be her voice, carefully measured, maybe trembling at the edges. Apologies dressed as explanations, confession softened by sentiment, and somewhere between the lines, a plea for understanding, maybe even forgiveness. But forgiveness isn't something you give to be noble. It's not an award or a ceremony. It's a quiet reckoning, one that belongs to both people or no one. I thought a lot about what we owe the people who once loved us, about what loyalty means when the person you stood beside turns out to be a stranger wearing your friend's face. For most of my life, I believed in repair, in giving people the benefit of the doubt, in choosing to understand instead of condemn. But Marianne taught me something different. Some things aren't meant to be repaired. Some things are meant to be remembered, so they're never repeated. That's not bitterness. It's vigilance. Compassion without boundaries becomes permission. And I had spent too many years mistaking silence for grace. I walked past a toy store one afternoon, one of those boutique places with pastel displays and hand-painted mobiles in the window. A couple stood just outside, cradling a baby between them, the kind of scene that used to send Marianne into tears. I paused, not out of sadness, out of awareness. Those were the people she'd fooled, that baby, someone's miracle, someone else, still waiting. She had taken more than money. She had taken time, possibility, the sacred space between hope and trust. And maybe she hadn't started out cruel. Maybe it was loneliness, maybe it was fear, but good intentions don't excuse harm. Desperation doesn't erase consequence. I wondered if the families she deceived would ever know each other, if they'd connect, compare stories, build a new kind of community from shared loss. A truth stronger than the lie that bound them. Maybe that was the only good that could come from all this. A reckoning that reached beyond her, a bond between survivors. As for me, I didn't need a circle or a label or even a conclusion. I just needed a clean line. And I had drawn it. With paper, with silence, with choices. I never opened the letter. Because some doors don't need to be reopened. Some truths don't need more words, and some love, no matter how deep it once ran, cannot survive what it's asked to excuse. Life didn't change overnight. There was no sudden peace, no triumphant clarity. Just a gradual returning, a slow, quiet realignment of everything that had been knocked out of place. I got back to work, answered emails, took walks without looking over my shoulder. The tension that once lived under my skin began to loosen, little by little, like a string that had finally stopped being pulled. Jonas noticed it first. One morning, he kissed my temple and said, "You're breathing differently." I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath for so long. The house felt different, too. Calmer, like something toxic had been removed. I started sleeping better. Started letting silence be stillness, not weight. And for the first time in weeks, I made dinner without thinking about Marianne's favorite wine or the way she used to lean against my kitchen counter, telling stories like she was spinning silk. I let those memories settle, not erased, but archived. Some truths aren't meant to be carried every day. The bank sent a letter confirming the closure of her accounts, a quiet, formal end. The investigation would continue without me now. My part was over. I didn't celebrate. But I did buy new notebooks, clean pages, blank spaces, not to write about what happened, but to begin again, on my terms. I didn't hear from Marianne again. Not a call, not a knock, not even a final message. Maybe she understood the line I drew was real, or maybe she was too far gone to notice. Either way, the silence between us remained untouched, and this time, it felt earned. One evening, I found myself walking by the ocean, where it all began. The same coastal town, the same stretch of sand where Marianne once planned her baby shower. The waves rolled in, steady and indifferent. The sky dimmed in lavender streaks. I stood barefoot on the shore, letting the cold water lap at my toes. No ceremony, no epiphany, just stillness. And in that stillness, something held. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't mourning her. I was choosing myself, my integrity, my clarity. In a world that asks women to forgive quietly, to absorb betrayal without flinching, to put loyalty above truth, there is something radical in walking away without fanfare, in protecting your boundaries like they're sacred, because they are. I turned back toward the streetlights, the sound of the tide behind me. The wind caught my coat as I climbed the steps to the boardwalk. There was no one waiting, no one watching, just me, whole. I never opened the letter, because I didn't need closure from her. I had found it in the decision not to look back, and in the quiet that followed, I knew. Some endings don't need to echo. Some just need to be clean. And mine was.